Hey guys, wanted to record you a quick little video about the difference between hourly versus package rates. I've been getting some questions on those, and the truth is you can really do either way to build a successful business. So I'm going to just kind of break down some of the pros and cons to each and help you kind of choose which feels true for you at whatever stage you're in. So the first thing that I'll start with is hourly. Hourly can be great if you're just beginning because it almost gives you a chance to really get a feel for what your hourly breakdown even is. So, for example, when you're first becoming a writer, you might not know how long it takes you to write a blog post or a social media post or the chapter of an ebook or an email, right? And so, hourly allows you to really get clear on that and to start to gauge how long it takes you for different types of content, for different industries, for different types of clients. And you start to kind of realize your baseline, right? And you start to realize, okay, I usually spend about this much time researching, maybe this much time outlining, this much time writing, this much time editing, this much time even emailing a client and kind of going back and forth. And it allows you to really just be transparent with your pricing and get paid for the time that you spend on it. All right. Another thing is it can be really great because it almost allows you to be paid and compensated anytime a client wants revisions, right? So if you're going to do package rates, you have to be very careful and strategic with how you set up your contract and even your kind of scope of work to be clear to a client. This is how many revisions are accepted, that kind of thing. Because otherwise you can find yourself going back and forth a lot on email, on meetings, on calls, on revisions, and not actually getting compensated like you should be for that time. So that's another reason, especially in the beginning, I love hourly. And especially if you don't want to put as much weight into your contract on having to get every detail right. With hourly, you can kind of give a ballpark to your clients and say what you expect it might take. And let's let them know that that's a ballpark. And then any revisions, will just be added on top of that. So I think it can be really one of the most straightforward ways of doing things where every single email you answer for them, every call that you take, every edit, you just add to your little hourly time tracker, and that's what you bill for at the end of a project. It's also nice because a lot of accounting sites like FreshBooks allow you to enter the hours or track the time that you spend on a project. So it becomes very simple to make it part of your overall process of just as soon as you go in to work on something for a client, you just press play on your little time tracker and your time is accounted for there. And at the end of the month, you simply bill them for that time. I mean, that's it, right? Like that's so simple. I've also heard a lot of clients say that they like this because it feels like incentives are aligned. So you are then able to work as efficiently as you can. And the client doesn't get into this debate of like, well, how long did this really take you? Should I be paying for, more time than it actually took? That kind of thing. Hourly is so clear because it's basically like, this is the time it took me. This is, what I'm going to bill for. It's like, it all matches up, right? And if you ever get into a place where you're finding something that is taking you a lot longer than necessary, you can always say to a client, I just wanted to let you know I'm at the hourly mark that we talked about, or I'm approaching that mark. You can tell them a little ahead of time. Just wanted to get your opinion on if you want me to continue working on this, or if you want me to send it to you as is, and we can have a discussion from there. It just keeps everyone so in communication and aligned. And I feel like a client likes it because there's no surprises. Like if you're going to let them know when they're at their budget, great, right? Like usually more often than not, they'll then say, okay, great. Like, let's continue going. How much time do you think you need? An hour is fine. But it just keeps everything really clear from the start. So I like hourly a lot for those reasons. Now, where it gets trickier is the better that you get as a writer, the faster you will go. Right. And so that's where you almost start to feel like there becomes this mismatch in the exchange of, wait, now I'm doing things and half the time it used to take me, but I'm still billing the same rate and it doesn't feel fair. Right. And so that's where I think you either need to raise your hourly rate. And that's totally a fair thing to do every 6 months or every year to just let clients know, like, I've loved working with you. I just wanted to let you know, I feel like I'm so comfortable with your industry now. I've grown a lot with so many other clients that I'll be raising my rate $5, that kind of thing. And you can incrementally do that over and over again to really pace your level of progress and speed and efficiency. Or you can move to something that's more like a package rate. A package rate is where you'd say, I'll charge $250 for this blog post, or $300, $400, $500, that kind of thing, right? And so you're not even getting into the hourly debate. You're just saying, if you want a blog post from me, it costs $300, all right? And so for you, the reason I think it can be harder for a new writer is because you don't always know what it's going to take you hour-wise. So I think a package thing is something you can consider moving to when you're a more advanced writer who really feels very, very confident in the amount of hours that they'll spend on something, right? Like, you know that charging $300 or $400 or $500 a blog post is going to give you ample time to be able to research, to write, to edit, to engage in emails. If you have to be very clear in your contract, though, like I mentioned earlier, with the package rate, you have to be very clearly stating things like, how many revisions do they get? Are calls included or are they separate? How much email correspondence or what's your communication going to be like? And is that included or is that extra? So for me, I lean a little bit more towards hourly, unless you're really at a place in your business where it feels simple to say, here's everything, it's all mapped out, and you have worked with enough clients to really know what the pitfalls can be in terms of, you just want to be very clear up front, right? Like, you don't want anyone to feel like they're getting the short end of the stick, right? So I think that package rates can be great, but you just have to be more explicit at the front about what the arrangement is to make sure that you're not accidentally getting into hours that are unaccounted for when you add up all the emails, all the revisions, and that kind of thing. So that's one thing that I would say with package rates. Now, the positive is you can charge more and more, right? It kind of takes the focus out of being so budget intensive. Like, it doesn't, it almost removes a little bit of the trepidation that clients have around, like, well, how much really will this cost me? Like, once you get into it with hours, because no matter what, at the start, they know exactly what they're paying for something, and they can decide if that value is worth it to them or not. So in that regard, it's kind of helpful. It's clear. It's like, I've got a few blog posts, here's the rate, I'll deliver them to you, right? And it allows you to scale much, I would say, higher, much faster, because all of a sudden you get out of that kind of intensity around every single minute is accounted for, every single hour, and you want to be diligent with your clients, right? Like, you want to be giving transparent work, but if you just become a faster writer who's more proficient, you're almost like not dinged for that. Like, you're able to just, your rate is your rate, and that's because that's the value of you writing a blog post for them, right? Like, versus this is what I'm going to charge for every single minute, if that makes sense. So that's kind of one of the positives of doing more of the package style. It also can, in some ways, just be simpler, where you have, blog posts are this much, social media is this much, emails are this much, and it just keeps it clean. However, this brings me back to another thing that's nice with hourly, which is basically it gives you the freedom and flexibility to add on any kind of work to, a client's invoice. So sometimes part of working with a client is you're getting a feel for what they even want to work on. And so, and they're feeling it out too, if they're not used to working with copywriters, right? So it could be like, maybe they think they want a blog post, but really they also then decide they want like a few social media posts, or, hey, can you publish on WordPress? Or, it kind of, if you're charging hourly, it gives that flexibility because you're not as baked into like, here's the buckets that you fall into. It can give you a little bit of that ability to be more nimble and to support a client in whatever way feels good to them. And then just you charge for the time regardless, right? And it can also give a little bit of flexibility where maybe month to month, a client doesn't know exactly the things they want you to work on, but they know they want like 10 of your hours reserved that month. That's called a retainer. That's really nice too, because then it gives them a little bit of freedom to be like, this month we want a thought leadership article, but next month we want our regular 2 blog posts instead, just shorter form. And so all of a sudden, you know that you're just pulling from this bucket of 10 hours versus kind of like having to rewrite the contract every single month based on a different deliverable, if that makes sense. So as I mentioned, I hesitated even recording this because I just felt like whatever way you use can be an amazing way to build a business. You can be successful either way. So if one feels really clean and good to you, then go with that. But otherwise, I think my main takeaway would be starting out. I personally believe that hourly can just be the simplest. Like, just charge per hour, because then you can get a feel for how many hours things actually take you. You can really clearly invoice at the end of the month for this is the exact time I spent on things. You can get paid for every single minute that you spend working with a client. And you can very gradually scale your rates over time to pace your own level of growth and improvements and efficiencies. And that feels like a very natural, fair exchange to clients. I would say package rates can be something that you either move to or experiment with later on in your career, because that's when you will actually have a feel. You'll be so dialed into how much time things actually take you, the kinds of projects you even want to work on. You might have a feel for, maybe in the beginning of your career, you want to experiment. So you're fine taking on a few hours of social and blogs and emails and, thought leadership posts and stuff. But later on in your career, you might be like, I only like blog posts. And so my rate is $500 a blog post. And that's it, take it or leave it, right? And so that can be like maybe more of a time when you move into that. And because you are so fast and so efficient with things, it's fair for them to pay you for your expertise in that way, right? So I guess there's pros and cons to both, right? Use whatever one serves you. But if I had to give my recommendation based on my experience, what's worked for me and what just feels like the cleanest way to do things from the start, I would lean towards that direction. So love to hear, comment below. Have you, worked with either of those routes? Like, which has worked better for you? Which are you a fan of and why? Like I said, I think there's room for both of them, and everyone watching has had a different experience in this regard. So I think it could be really interesting to hear and share and help each other in terms of what you've seen work, what hasn't worked for you, even like lessons learned, and what you're doing now would be super interesting to hear. So would love to hear from you, and thanks for watching.